I have yet to meet an employee that wakes up every day and be like, I'm going to be a jackass today. That's my goal. Nobody wakes up like that. But sometimes we get there out of fear. And so if you avoid conflict, you manufacture fake peace. If you avoid conflict, you manufacture fake peace. And that makes everything unstable and insecure. And we feel it even if we don't label it.
Meet Amy. Omar, we sent that update 3 days ago. She tries her best to keep her voice steady. 15 people staring back in small Zoom squares. The VP, 2 senior directors, site leaders from Europe and North America. Omar leans back, sighs, and dramatically says, well, we never received the update. We didn't have the clarity. Quality keeps changing their direction, and it's affecting our timelines. Amy feels the heat rush to her face. No one says a word. She was thrown under the bus, publicly, again. The meeting moves on, but Amy doesn't hear the rest of it. 3 months into her role as Senior Director of Quality for a food distribution company, and this has become routine. She was brought in to standardize processes, improve audit scores, and create alignment. But she instead walked into politics. And Omar is the worst offender. He doesn't respond to her emails. He avoids her meetings. He's resistant to everything. A few days later, Amy visits one of the manufacturing sites and spots Omar on the production floor. She says, hey, Omar, do you have a few minutes to chat before the afternoon sessions? Omar barely looks up. He says, I'm slammed, and walks away. Amy stands there holding her notebook, feeling small. This isn't what Amy signed up for. She wants collaboration, clarity, results. She wants to be the kind of leader that brings people together, not one that's always bracing for the next fight. Today, I'm speaking with Jenn Whitmer, leadership expert, TEDx speaker, and creator of Joyosity. Jenn helps leaders navigate conflict and communication breakdowns without losing themselves in the process. And I can't wait to hear how Jenn would help someone like Amy to stop absorbing the tension and to build a culture where people actually want to work together. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Jenn, I was reading about you that when you were young, you created whole towns with Legos and Barbies.
Indeed.
And I wanted to ask you to tell me this story and what you learned about yourself from it.
Well, okay. So as an extroverted only child until I was 16 of a highly introverted mother, we'll just set that up. I needed my people. And we lived outside of the neighborhood. We didn't live in a planned community. My parents lived on an acre. And so we didn't have, which is not a lot of land, but when everybody else is living on a 1/4 acre plot in a neighborhood with a clubhouse, I didn't have that. And so in our backyard, I would My parents loved this. I would use the hose to deepen the rivets, like when the dirt cracks, I would use the hose to like just erode it more. And that was our town river. And then I would set up like Legos in the Barbie playhouse. I didn't have a big Barbie playhouse, like the big 3-story one. Wasn't that cool? But I would like put the Barbies out and build the Legos and other things that made the town and like how we just interacted and did things. And when my cousins all got together, we would, play jobs. We'd play jobs. And so then we had places to go with our jobs. Sometimes we'd play jobs, with the Barbies as who we are. And as we got older, we would be the people and we would go to we would use our desks and things like that and play with office supplies. And what I remember doing was that work, it was a part of life. Like it wasn't work was this separate thing. Work was the play that we did. My parents both worked. And I didn't ever grow up with this idea that work was bad. My grandparents owned a restaurant. My dad worked for our city. My mom was a nurse. Everybody had a job. And I don't remember people just, obviously they complained about work sometimes, but most of the time it was like work was this gift that we had to give to the world. And so what I learned with this playing was one, that work can be a joy. Work can be and should be part of the things that bring us joy. And then number two, work always involves other people. And so even when I didn't have people around, I made the people around. And because nobody literally works by yourself. Even a solopreneur, even a freelancer, you don't actually work by yourself. There's that old movie, I hate to say old because it's, younger than I am, the movie The Net with Sandra Bullock. So go back and enjoy the computers in that movie from, I think, 1999, maybe 98. And she was this reclusive person who lived in a house by herself and nobody knew her except for her online friends. But she still had to work with other people who were online people. And she still had to deliver her product because she was a freelancer to her clients. Work will always involve other people. And so learning how to be with other people and interact with other people is a huge part of what we do at work. So even though I had to make up my people sometimes, I still made up little arguments between them because otherwise, where's the drama? Because also I was mimicking real life. And even though my parents didn't complain about work necessarily and think it was bad, there were things that happened that they didn't love and they would talk about. Or my grandma and grandpa who owned the restaurant complaining about a patron or whatever, a guest that came in or an employee, whatever. There were still conflicts that they had to solve because we have to work with other people. And we sometimes pretend that we should be able to do it by ourselves. And we shouldn't have to, it shouldn't be this way with other people. Other people are always going to exist, but we can learn how to have joy at work and get along better with everybody in the work that we do. So that's my long-winded answer to your simple question.
Well, I love it. So I got to ask, what was your favorite job in your little town?
In my town?
What was your favorite job?
Well, I was always the teacher when we would play, and I was an educator for 20 years, so that really tracks. The other job I really, really liked was the music hall. So the person there was concerts happening at the music hall, because I also was a music teacher for a long time in my career before I became a school leader. And so those were my two favorite jobs. And usually it turned into a musical because that is, again, who I am. So
I love it. I love it. I love the creativity in all of this. It's fantastic. And so, so you said educator, and then you became an educator. And you talk about how, and I assume that was the dream job, I assume at some point in your life, but you talk about how that ended up being toxic in some way. What happened there where your dream job became a place where it was lacking joy?
Lacking indeed. So I began my school career, as I said, as a music teacher, kindergarten through 8th grade. I had many kids in a short amount of time. So I stayed home and then went back into administration. So I didn't ever really want to be the administrator, but I ended up really loving it because not only was I working with students, I also got to work with the adults who shaped the students and also the adults that shaped my kids because I was working at my kids' school. So it was a really integrated community experience, which is, I think, sometimes part of our problem when we separate things too much. So I was working with people who had roles and influences in my children's life and their friends' lives, and obviously other people. And we had built this place that was high academic performance. And we also had a place where people really wanted to stay. Teachers didn't really leave. We didn't have a huge high turnover rate. Elementary school teachers often leave because their husbands move or they have babies. And that was really the only reason people were leaving. And so we had this great culture, so much so that we had been awarded a Blue Ribbon Award for our school, which is based entirely on test scores and school culture. And I was in charge of test scores. I was the director of assessment and feedback. And so I was in charge of all the things that everybody hates, report cards, conferences, standardized testing. And I approached it differently as we co-created this amazing culture and put joy in the center of it. So we won this Blue Ribbon Award, and it was just a phenomenal place to work. And we had this change of leadership, that this job that had become my dream turned into a place of drain and then toxicity and difficulty because we stopped putting joy in the center. And because we did that, we had different priorities that meant we didn't actually communicate effectively. We had a lot of conflict. We had a lot of confusion. We had a lot of politics that came up, people kind of vying for power, because now we didn't have this shared goal in the center. What used to be a very clear center purpose of what we were all doing became distributed, became separated, and that left a lot of room for dysfunction. And I can remember sitting on my couch after a really horrible team meeting that just went completely sideways. And I had this knee injury that wouldn't go away because this toxicity had been building. And I was crying the ugly tear cry where you're like snotty and gross. And like, what am I even doing? I'm not a leader. I am ineffective. I'm terrible at my job. And this is like 6 months after I'd walked across the stage with the Secretary of Education accepting this Blue Ribbon Award. Like, things changed so quickly.
Yeah.
Even though they hadn't changed that quickly. It'd been building for a while, and then it just came to a head. And I remember thinking, I can't live like this. How did we get here? Why is this happening? And the pain of that is what started me in my curiosity as a teacher, trying to figure out, why did this happen? How did we go from this place that I couldn't wait to get to work? I was supposed to be working 32 hours a week and I was working 60 because I loved it. And it was so great. What happened? And so that's when I started digging into the research. I got another master's degree. I just started wanting to understand what makes a joyful, profitable, amazing culture, and what happened to us that it went downhill so fast.
Yeah.
That pivoting moment was not fast in the result, but I look back and I know that gray couch moment was when I was like, I can't keep doing this. This isn't okay anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that, Jen. I remember when I was working at Tesla years ago, and it was a great environment with the training group that I was a part of. We had great leadership, and the culture was so good for our department.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak for other groups, because a large organization like Tesla, every department is its own company.
Very much so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when there was a change in leadership, it was a fast change in culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it went from a place where I really enjoyed going to work every day. I loved it. I look forward to it, to why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
It was fast. So when you said it can happen fast, I agree with you. It can happen fast. And so when you did all this research and you educated yourself, what did you notice were the things that were evident in that culture that made it the way it was? Like, what were the problem areas, the things that maybe were going unnoticed that you found out through your research? Oh, that's why it was like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my previous degrees, because teachers always have more than one. Like that's just how educators roll. Well, like education solves everything. So I had done a master's work in leadership and theology, which is a really interesting and different way to look at leadership. And so that was looking at this from a very specific lens. And then when I went and got communication and culture, it was broader. So combining like, here's what the individual does, here's how the individual impacts culture, which is what that leadership degree was about. And then communication as culture was, well, how does that leader interact with a larger, essentially a system? Because people, as we work together, we become a system. And we don't love that language, but that's what we are when we start to work together. And what I discovered from the training and the research, and then going on to work with other corporate organizations, when we remove joy from the center, which looks like purpose, understanding why we're here and what we're doing, it looks like belonging. You are welcome here, and we're going to make this work. And it looks like being really grateful you get to do this work. Those are the 3 markers of joy. And everybody's sense of individual gratitude is based on what they really like. So I have my mother's like nightmare job. As a keynote speaker, I stand up in front of hundreds of thousands of people all the time, and I love it. I haven't met a microphone I didn't like. It's so fun. My mom would die. That would not be grateful for her. Like for me, I'm like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. And some people love that about designing a book cover, or they love it about building the architect and coding behind this new, can you tell that I'm not a scientist? This new whatever, or they're at the bench looking through their microscope. That is like, I can't believe I get to do this job. So that's different for everybody. And you have to know that as an individual. And you have to know your purpose. But when we start to talk about being together, we have to have a clear purpose that this is what we're all working for. And my purpose has to connect to that. And Jade Simmons is a amazing keynote speaker and just human in general. And she defines purpose as purpose isn't what you do. Purpose is what happens in other people when you do what you do. So purpose isn't, our company is a bank, so we make sure people have money. That's not purpose. Purpose is we make sure people have the income, safety that they need to do these other things in our community or whatever. Clearly, I'm also not a bank. But like purpose has to be something that impacts other people. And that shared purpose was what started to fall apart for us. And I've noticed that that's what falls apart in other places. They've got really pretty things on the wall with visions and missions and sometimes values and even statements sometimes after that. And sometimes they have purpose, but it's not clear. And so when people aren't allowed to like say, here's what I want to do, here's what I'm good at, and they don't feel like they belong, that what starts to happen and there's a lack of clarity on purpose, you've got conflict that people don't know how to deal with. You've got really difficult communication struggles. You end up with poor emotional regulation and lack of self-awareness of leaders. And all of that starts to make things what I call full of toil. And so toil, when there's too much toil, turns into toxicity.
Define toil for me. Help me understand toil.
Yeah. So toil is the opposite of joy. So if joy has 3 markers, purposeful, you feel like you belong and you're connected and you feel lucky to do it. Toil is the opposite. It feels meaningless. Like, why does this even matter? So the things that you said, why am I even coming to work? I don't even know what this is doing. It feels like a lack of resources. Maybe it's something you like to do, but you don't have enough. Like the deadline is tomorrow. You're like, hey, can you make this multi-tiered coding thing by tomorrow? No, I can't. That's not possible. That feels like toil. So you have the pressure of not enough resources of time or not enough people to make something happen. That can be toil. It feels like you're not skilled to do it. Like I would not say that I know my way around a spreadsheet, but I know how to open one. I can use it. But if I have to go deep into an Excel sheet, I get a little twitchy because that's toil to me because I'm not skilled in it. Not that I can't, but I actually don't have those skills to do it well. And so things that you're not skilled at, you don't have enough resource for, it feels just completely meaningless, or it's just boring. You're like, this is not the work I wanted do. It's boring. It may be something that you used to love that you no longer love. Seasons and of your life change. When I had 4 kids, 6 and under, toil looked different than now that all of my kids are in their teens and 20s. Toil is
Right.
different at that point. And so toil is something that never goes away. Like we can't e- expunge our lives of toil. And so I teach people to live within what's called the joy ratio, because you also can't be joyful all day, every day. Like you can't. Somebody's got to clean out the cat box. Somebody's got to do the things that make work that we don't love. And so if we spend, from the research, if we spend 35% of our time in the work that it feels meaningful, that feels like connection and belonging, that feels we're grateful to do it, that joyful work, 35% of our time in that, I call it joy's magic third. And then we keep toil down to toil's tiny 10, and 10% of our time.
Okay.
That ratio actually produces the productivity, the innovation, all the things about culture that we want. And you still have to deal with the rest, which I like to call the messy middle, because there's a big 55% in there. But it gives the space to learn how to do the messy middle. And it helps keep that toil down into that 10%. When toil starts to creep up above 10, that's when things become difficult or dysfunctional. And if it really starts to be left to its own devices, it turns toxic.
Yeah. I like the way you frame this because I can connect to all of it. I remember a few years ago, this was around right after COVID, and I was doing a lot of work virtually because there wasn't any traveling. I wasn't around people. And Jen, I was on Zoom all day, every day, 5 days a week, and I started to feel drained by it all. I didn't have any time with other people, and I love being around people. I wasn't tapping into my creativity, and I think those two things would fit under the joy 35% that you
Yeah.
just alluded to. So I made some changes, and now I am definitely more in that space of joy because I'm tapping more into my creativity through the work that I do in speaking in my workshops, as well as being around people again versus only being on Zooms and virtual conferences or virtual meetings. So I love this. I agree with it. Now, that middle part is where I'm curious. Okay, so what do we do about that 55%? Like,
Yeah.
I definitely understand the tiny 10, right? We want to try to reduce that. We have to do it. We have to take out the garbage. We
Mhm.
have to do those things, right?
Yep.
But there's that middle piece that people I think would be curious to hear from you about. How do we handle that 55%?
And that's where everybody has skills they can improve. So I love the concept of the working genius and the zones of genius from two different, so Patrick Lencioni and Gay Hendricks. Like those are great concepts. And so not everybody can be a genius at how to get along with other people, but you can get really good at it. And most of the messy middle is that. It
Mm,
is understanding how you interact with the world through, I use the Enneagram as a personality tool to help understand that, how you approach the world, how other people approach the world, and how do I then engage with other people. It's all the people power skills that we need. Some people like to call them soft skills, and I refuse. So that is communication skills, conflict resolution. How do I make good decisions? How do I practice emotional regulation and emotional intelligence? In an everyday life, it also looks like, how do I start my day? How do I structure my life so I'm not relying on motivation all the time, because motivation is going to fail you? How do I structure my life? Which is kind of the messy middle. It's kind of boring to develop a rhythm and a ritual and then to kind of do things consistently. We don't love that. At least some personality types don't. Others are like, give it to me. I love it.
the
And
structure. They love the
like
structure.
structure. Give me the structure. So I have learned to love the structure and how beneficial it is. And all of that is in the messy middle because it also changes. And
Mm,
like if you have a job in COVID, everything got up. it was an upheaval of everything. We all had to figure out new ways to manage our daily life. And so you're talking about, I wasn't with people and didn't have creativity. We all had to figure out a new thing. And that's why it's so messy. And also, it's messy because people change too. Even when we don't have some ginormous thing that happens in our culture, whenever you level up in leadership, we get a little bit afraid because it's new. And so we revert back to the ways that felt comfortable. And the skill has to be re-energized, shall we say. And so I work a lot with leaders who kind of got promoted to that. They're in that first VP role, director role, and now sometimes they're managing a bigger group or the leader of leaders. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't just do what I used to do before, because usually it was hustle. And now you get scared a little bit, and all that messy middle changes. You have to deal with more of those people power skills where you could kind of hustle your way out before sometimes. And that messy middle is so messy because we can upskill and they're like, got it. I know how to do it. And then it changes. And so when I describe this in workshops and teams, I often talk about a map. So if you think about, you pull up that flat map, or when I was in elementary school, they pulled down the map in the back of the room and it's flat. You're just looking at the map. Well, then you've got topography, like, oh, this is up and down. Like there's actual 3D components to maps. And so sometimes we stop there and we're like, I got it. I understand. I know how to get there. I know I'm going to go over the mountain, or I'm going to go down to sea level, whatever. But then there's weather. And so like right now it's pouring down rain outside of my window. I had to turn on more lights. I had to adjust. Well, there's weather in your team as well. And so you can get really good at something, and then you've got a rainy season for whatever reason. Pressures at home, the profit pressures, whatever happens, then you've got to deal with that. And that's why that messy middle feels so challenging sometimes. But it is learning the skills again and again and practicing them that keep it in the middle rather than becoming toil. And then sometimes some people are like, I actually really love this, and it becomes joy to them. But that the change aspect of it is what I think is the most challenging to people, because they're like, I already learned that. You did, but now you have to apply it in a new place. And that can be really challenging.
It can. And I think that what you're really pointing to here, Jen, is adaptability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's being adaptable, and that's not hard. I mean, that's not easy. That's hard for people to be adaptable.
Yeah. It's hard to be adaptable, and we have lived in a culture for a very long time in the business world that I call checkbox leadership. Well, I did it. I mean, I checked the box. I literally did the thing. Was it effective? Did it produce the outcome you wanted? We don't like the rest of those questions. And funny story, when my kids, I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and I have one boy who is fantastic at some things, but this, not so much. I would say his job was to sweep the floors, like sweep and mop once a week. That was his job. And he'd be like, I swept, I mopped. Did he get out the broom? Absolutely. Did he get out the mop? Yes, he did. Did he miss whole sections of the wood floors? Yes, he did. And so I had to change my language from sweeping and mopping to, I want the floors cleaned. Your job is to make sure the floors are cleaned. And that is outcome-based. And so we do this in leadership all the time. We look at check boxes. Did I do the thing? Rather than what is the outcome that I want?
Yeah.
And so leadership requires a little bit more of looking at the outcomes that you want. And if the checkbox didn't work, you might have to do something different. And we don't like that because it requires change, like you said, and the adaptability is difficult. But then the story of the culture is like, no, we checked the box. Why is it not working? Is also reinforcing that, which makes it a double whammy.
Yeah. It's activity-based versus outcome-based. Well, this is how it worked in the past. If I just copy and paste, it's going to work now. Mm-hmm. However, that today's setting could be so different than a month ago, a quarter ago, a year ago, that we have to be willing to try different approaches, make our adjustments. Then, as you said, there's different weather patterns. And at times, the storm that comes is a personality type that could be difficult. And in Amy's story, there is a personality that is creating some challenge for her. So she has this initiative, right? She wants to be able to make some changes. She was given this responsibility, and she's being met with resistance by one of the department heads who says, well, this isn't working. He's throwing her under the bus. He's calling her out in front of other leaders. When you hear a story like that, and I'm sure you've heard many stories like this, like how do you diagnose it? What's going on?
Yeah, well, there are multiple things. So one of the things I talk about is creating positive culture with complex people, because Amy and Omar are not two-dimensional in and of themselves. So something's going on with Omar that we don't know about. We know more about what Amy is facing, but we don't know what he's facing. So the beginning place of curiosity is really some questions. And when I'm working with leaders, even when I'm working with a team, I'm always starting with you. Like you, the individual, are CEO of your own desk. So even if you don't hold the title, you're the only person that you can really be in charge of. So we have to start with you. And so some questions I would go ask Amy would be things like, how do you feel about this? We don't like to talk about emotions. I am sure Amy feels disregarded. I'm sure she feels disrespected. I think those are the root things, not confusion. I'm sure she's confused because I was given this task. There's not a lack of clarity about the task. There's a lack of clarity about his response. And so understanding her own emotions around this is really important. In any difficult situation, understanding how you feel about it is a signal to what is going on. And if we don't address emotions, they come out sideways in some way, shape, or form. So really starting with how do you feel about this? And then where are you getting your information? What do you think about this? What were you asked to do? Who told you that? Where did you get that information? How did you come to that conclusion? Because if she's been told to do these QA things, clearly Amy has expertise, and that's partly why she's been hired and put in this role. But who has, not in a like, well, who gave you the authority? But like understanding for herself, where does my authority come from? How did I get to do this? And do I not actually have that operation? I have like the title authority, but do I not have the relational authority yet? Is that what's missing here? How do I know that? What is the data behind this? How do I think about this? And then what do I want to do? What do you want to do? Do you want to move forward as if Omar doesn't exist? Like you're just going to plow through? Do you want to go talk to him? What do you want to do? What is the next action that you want to take based on how you feel about it and what you know to be true? What is your truth? And in that, there's the opportunity to go to Omar and ask some of those same questions. And I think that bravery is so hard because it's like, oh, what happened? I have a client right now. I asked her, I was like, what are you afraid is going to happen if you have this conversation? And and she's like, well, and I was like, okay, that's maybe too broad. What are you afraid is going to happen in the middle of the conversation? What are you afraid he is going to do? And that was easier for her to get to. And then we could go out. Well, what do you think might happen after that? Like, what are you afraid of is another great question when you're facing these things. Are you afraid you're going to get fired? Are you afraid he's going to continue to be passive aggressive? Well, he's already doing that. So let's figure out how to talk about it. And specifically, when you're talking with somebody who is passive aggressive, they don't do well when you reflect back what is happening. And the first time it happens to you, like when I was understanding Amy's story, I was a little bit like, oh, I am back in. I was like back in the meeting room with my passive aggressive boss, who was not the yeller and that kind of abuser. It was absolutely the gaslighting, the passive aggressive, the delay, the stall, the sabotage, which is more common. And so those types of people don't do well And they have to own it when you actually address it head on. So, but Amy can't get there until she's asked herself those questions first, because she, like, the rest of the meeting, she couldn't hear what happened because the emotions of it, the shock of it, we're still processing. So that's why
Yeah.
you have to start with the emotions first and
Yeah.
asking yourself, well, how do I feel about this? What do I think about this? What do I want to do? Are powerful questions in any kind of conflict, any kind of situation, before you start to address it. And I think
Mm.
that is the beginning of starting to address this type of issue. And then you can go to that person and say, I mean, I know he's kind of ignoring her. Then it could be something, this is a little bold, and I don't know exactly. I would want a little bit more information before I suggested this, but I imagine this is where I would go with it. Okay, Omar, like, we're really struggling to get along. I've been given a task, you've been given a task, and this doesn't seem to be working. So I think we need to bring somebody else in. Would you like to choose that person, or would you like me to? And sometimes they'll continue to stall. And then you can go, okay, so I didn't get an answer from you. So I'm going to talk to our boss tomorrow at this time. Would you like to join us?
Yeah.
Like, this is like, just reflect back. Here's what's happening. And
Yeah.
inviting somebody else in. There are lots of other steps beforehand, but when somebody's gotten this far,
Yeah.
uh, you've got to bring in somebody else. And I think that is also scary because it's like, we failed. We failed. It's not failure. It's not working. It's not like a failure is like so many different things. And we are at the production has completely stopped. The company is gone. Like, you're still in the process of, it's bad, but you can still save this. This is
Yeah.
working through. It's not easy. I sure wish it would have been done when it was simpler, but it's still possible.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to bring in that other party. When I can't do my job because of something else from somebody else, and I have tried to work it out with that person first, it is appropriate to get somebody else who can handle it. It is not
Yeah.
appropriate to go to, like, below him and be like, I can't believe Omar's acting, and like go gossip. It doesn't help anything. But
Right.
bringing somebody else in and approaching it like that with somebody who is stonewalling you, essentially, they tend to start to get their act
Yeah.
together a little bit.
And I think you're right to suggest that it's not the first resort. It's not the first thing you try to do,
No.
right? You were saying, like, there are many steps before that, right, Jen? And I
Mhm.
think that in this case, the questions that one would ask themselves, so Amy would ask herself a bunch of things about how she feels and think about, well, what was communicated to me, what might have been communicated to the other person,
Right.
because there might be something she's missing. And if she asks these questions, it could help her first figure out, okay, what do I need to consider that I haven't considered yet? And who do I maybe need to go to learn more? And then what do I need to ask Omar, right? What do
Mhm.
I need to ask him to understand? And I think that when approaching Omar, let's assume that he isn't this bad guy where he's completely like, maybe he is more open, right? What I think you would end up finding is that Omar is under some sort of pressure. There's something he's going through that's making him act the way he is. I mean, isn't very, very often the case. It's
Mhm.
that people are frustrated, upset, tense due to something completely different. Like,
Mhm.
maybe it's nothing to do with Amy, or maybe it is, but it isn't Amy's fault. She's just given a responsibility, and all it requires is Omar to feel seen and understood. And once he's understood, Jen, then that real exchange could begin to start to happen.
Mhm. It begins with a curiosity about yourself and the other person,
Yeah.
because you're right. He's going through something. Because I have yet to meet an employee that wakes up every day and be like, I'm going to be a jackass today. That's my goal. Nobody wakes up like that.
Right.
But sometimes we get there out of fear. I mean, I could think of 1,000 things that Omar is like, if she starts doing quality assurance and she finds a mistake, I'm getting fired. That is a really logical train of thought,
Right.
which also makes me go, but then don't you want the quality to be better? So what if we are like, let's solve this together, which is Amy wanting to do collaboration as her goal. But if that wasn't explained to him, it's like, Amy's just here to check your work. If that's what he heard, that is a very different story than Amy's here to make us all successful, and her responsibility is the double check because we're all human. That is a totally different story that Omar may have received. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I would hope, I know he ignored all of the story. He ignored the invitations. He ignored the emails. And that's why you might have to go to this like, hey, this isn't working. So I have to go to the next step. That's appropriate, even though it's scary.
But even the way you presented it, it was still not in a way where you're throwing Omar under the bus or something, because you go to him first and you inform him before you bring in the third person. Like that's a different sequence, right? If you bring in the third person and blind him by it, you might create more conflict.
Absolutely.
But if you tell him, hey, since we haven't been able to get on the same page, the appropriate next step is for us to bring in somebody else. Would you like me to bring that person in, or would you like to nominate someone? It's giving that person clear expectations before you go proceed with some sort of arbitration in this case. Now, what's interesting about this story, and I was telling you before we started recording, is that this is a recent instance with someone I worked with. And what it ended up being was the person in the story, Omar, which, I changed the name of, but Omar in the story, it was more about control. He felt like he was losing control.
Yeah.
Like he was losing power and authority, and no one was listening to him anymore. And that was all being taken away from him. And once the conversation happened with a very respectful approach and very curious approach, it shifted everything. It shifted the relationship, and everything ended. I mean, it's not perfect, of course. It's not, everything's not perfect. However, they're able to now collaborate and work together because Amy in this story had that courage to approach Omar with genuine curiosity.
Yeah. And there will always be personalities that rub you the wrong way. So like I know about myself, there is a particular Enneagram type that if that person isn't in a healthy space, it will super irritate me. Like I know that. And it's also what I like to call sandpaper. It's sandpaper people. And the job of sandpaper is to smooth things out. So I can just consistently be irritated with them and be irritated with the grit of that. Or I can say, okay, what can I develop from this? What can I learn from this? Do I need to set a stronger boundary? Because sometimes it's not backing away. Sometimes it is, I need to do something different. But knowing that also eases a little bit of my own guilt about like, why can't I get along with this person? Oh, because there are very specific things that trigger something in me that I don't like. And that is a logical train of thought rather than just like this, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. Why can't they just, those types of things that we tend to fall into.
Yeah.
And knowing that about yourself is really powerful because sandpaper people will always be around and they polish. That's what sandpaper does in a really good and beautiful way if you allow that. If you don't allow it, it just cuts all the time. And you don't get anything done together.
It's like a signal, right? It's a signal that's revealing something to you that, hey, here's an opportunity for you to figure out, how can I work with this person? Because like you said, they're not going to go away. And you can't run from them. You can't escape them. You're going to have to find a way if you want to be a great leader who can impact others in a positive way. You have to learn. You can't just keep avoiding these people, right?
Exactly.
And that's what I think that too often that's what it is. People just paint the villain, right? There's the villain. I'm the victim of this villain, and I just want to avoid the villain. No, it's okay. This person is triggering me. That's interesting. I'm curious. What is it about that bothers me? I'm curious. How can I really partner with this person and be able to work through this? That genuine curiosity with self is where you start, like you said. Then it's the curiosity about the other person.
Yeah. And when we put them into like the villain hero thing, there's a name for that. We call that the drama triangle.
Right.
And you just get stuck in this circle and nobody gets anything done. So then you avoid it. And if you avoid conflict, if you avoid the difficulty, if you avoid the hard conversations, everything good is on the other side of a hard conversation. And so if you avoid conflict, you manufacture fake peace. If you avoid conflict, you manufacture fake peace. And that makes everything unstable and insecure. And we feel it even though if we don't label it. And as a recovering conflict avoider, like I have moonwalked my way out of many, many of a difficult conversation. But the pain of broken relationships, the pain of fake peace is too great. I had to learn how to address it. And so like maybe Amy you might have to set different expectations. And so you just said this to me in a meeting, and I don't want you to talk to me that way. Sometimes you got to say that. And that is terrifying. But you can't do that if you haven't practiced before. Oh, I want to set this expectation. That doesn't just come out suddenly in a meeting. Like
or if it does, you blow up and now you're creating more conflict, right?
Exactly. It's not done with either any kind of self-control or self-regulation. And the people that we admire the most when they talk like that are so self-possessed and so like confident in who they are, but also very open at the same time. And that takes practice of knowing yourself, be able to do that. And it's powerful.
It's so powerful.
It's so scary.
It's scary. It takes a lot of courage. And you know, I often refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser, you know, and still recovering. You know, it's never perfect. And so I feel you. I would avoid conflict as much as possible. I had to really work on having those difficult conversations. And even to this day, when I have to have them, I do it. It still has its discomfort.
Same.
It's not as bad as before, I'll tell you that. I mean, it's definitely gotten better because I've really worked on it, and it still comes up for me. So you mentioned so many different great questions you would ask Amy, and if she were to, let's say, come to you after maybe she read your book and she's learning about you and she said, you know, I need to talk to Jenn about this, Jenn Whitmer, and she's going to help me through it. She tells you her story and you have an opportunity here, Jenn, to ask her a question or two. Where would you start? Which question would you start with and why?
I would start with, how do you feel about this? And the reason I start with how you feel, and we're super uncomfortable about that in corporate culture, and there's not a lot of ways to ask it. You can ask, how do you feel about this? What are your emotions around this? I haven't come up with many more. And the reason I start with emotions is because, one, I think they are the ignored center of intelligence. We've got 3 centers of intelligence: our heart, our emotions, which is how we make decisions. Nobody likes that, but emotions are how we make decisions. And it's how we develop relationships and connect to people. So that's why I start there, because it's very different if I feel confused because I don't actually know what my job is, then I feel completely disrespected. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and I feel like he is not respect. Those are 2 different emotions, and those are different signals. So that's one aspect of why I ask, how do you feel? The second thing is, they're what is swirling literally in our bodies. So the emotions are chemical reactions that happen in our physiology. So the neurobiology of ourselves is emotion. And then the story we tell ourselves about that feeling or about that emotion is our feeling. And so identifying the emotions and the feeling immediately starts to let the chemicals that are in your body pass through. When we talk about processing emotions, and we kind of make fun of it sometimes, I have to process my emotions, all that really is labeling them. It's labeling them. It is identifying where they are and then letting them release. Like you said, thank you. I mean, sometimes I am super snarky with my emotions. I'm like, thank you, fear. I am not awesome. Okay, I'm afraid. You know, like that's just how I deal with it, because I don't particularly love negative emotions. And so when I add that, but it's still, when I label it and I say, oh, this is how I'm feeling, it helps me understand the why I'm feeling that way. Well, I'm feeling disrespected because of these actions. So then you get to the observable behaviors that are happening, and we can do something with observable behaviors. And also, when you own your own emotions, Omar is not making Amy feel some way. Omar did something, Amy feels a certain way. I feel this when this happens. That also gets us into some other skills like I statements and other things that I would help people do. But you can't start any of that until you deal with the emotions. And that's why it's first. It also makes us super uncomfortable, but it gets out. And then you're like, oh, okay. It just starts to calm everything. And then we can get to observable behaviors, data points, logic that is also powerful, but it's going to be clouded if we're feeling some sort of way and we haven't dealt with it.
Yeah. For all of our listeners, it is the complete opposite of what everyone tells you, right? Like, what does everyone tell you? Like, look at it logically and think about your positions, and they don't talk about the emotions. But Jenn, you're offering a completely different approach, which is the right approach, which is start with the emotions, then get into the planning and the process and how you're going to solve the problem. And for all of our listeners, I really recommend checking out the great work that Jenn does as a speaker, as a facilitator, as a trainer. You can learn more at jennwhitmer.com. We'll put that into the show notes. And we talked about it before we started recording. You have a free resource on there, 20 helpful phrases in difficult conversations. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So at jennwhitmer.com, Jenn with 2 N's, jennwhitmer.com, there is 20 helpful phrases in difficult conversations. And what that resource does, it's like 1 page, 2 pages. I think it might be 2. And it's just the different parts of the conversation. How do you ask for a difficult conversation? What do you do to get started in it? How do you manage the messy middle of a conversation? And then how do you close a hard conversation? Because then it's just like awkward. Like, like, are we done? I don't know. Like,
are we done?
And so there's just some phrases. And I have found that sometimes just having someone else's words, I can practice. There are physical components to literally practicing it with your muscle memory, because talking is a muscle. It helps you in the middle of the conversation later, and it's just helpful to have it on hand. And you can practice them, make them sound like your own. Some of them are not the way you'd say it. They're the way Jenn Whitmer says it. So you can but take that and then ask it the way you can. And there's 2 of my favorites are in there. I'm going to share one. The other one is I'm going to keep for you to get the resource. But one is exchange why for what. Rather than asking somebody, why do you think that? Or why do you feel that? Why do you want to do that? What are the reasons that you think that? What are the reasons you want to do that? Just exchange why for what. And it is a powerful, as I call, conversational glider. And the other one, you have to get the resource to find out my other favorite.
Ooh, I love that. I love it. I want to get it now. And so I love that, by the way, the why, the what thing, because why questions can create defensiveness, right? And why do you think that? Question. Right. Mm-hmm. When it's yourself, it's helpful. But sometimes when you're asking somebody else, they can immediately put their walls up. So that's really valuable. Jenn, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I know I got a lot from it, and I'm sure our audience did as well. I appreciate you, Jenn. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me and trusting me with your audience. It's been great. Thank you.
What I loved about that conversation with Jenn is that she challenged common perspectives. She offered a different way of thinking about things. And I'm going to do my best to synthesize it into 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight, fake peace is still unresolved conflict. If you try to just swipe it under the rug and avoid the discomfort, it's not going to solve the problem. It still needs to be addressed. You're just delaying it. So don't assume just because you're not saying anything that you're creating peace. You're not. The conflict is still unresolved. Second insight, joy has a formula, and so does toxicity. She mentioned that joy at work consists of 3 markers: purpose, belonging, and gratitude. And we're all going to have toil. That's part of the way it works. But if it exceeds 10% of your time, that's when it becomes dysfunctional. So what she said was, you want to be able to have at least 35% of your time or more. So over a third of your time, you're spending doing meaningful work that you're deeply connected to. And the more, of course, the better. We can't have the expectation that it's 100% of the time. That's really the point. Third insight, sandpaper people are trying to polish you. I actually looked up this quote I read once from Rumi because I think it's very related to what Jenn said. The quote is, if you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished? So it's a choice that you make in perspective. Is this someone who is kind of smoothing you out with that sandpaper, or are you looking at it as it's cutting you? That's a choice that you make in regards to the perspective that you're taking on this quote-unquote difficult person. Actionable takeaways, first of 3. First one, start every conflict with 3 questions. 1, how do I feel about this? 2, what do I think about this? And 3, what do I want to do? We can't ignore the emotions. And I like that We're starting with the emotions, how you feel, and then you guide yourself through a process to really work through the conflict. Second actionable takeaway, exchange why for what in hard conversations. Rather than say, well, why do you think that, which creates defensiveness, you could say, what are the reasons that you think that? Third actionable takeaway, when you're stuck with a difficult person, name it directly. So in other words, if that person is avoiding your email, don't fall into gossip, just name what's happening. Try something like, this doesn't seem to be working, and I'd like to maybe bring someone else in. Would you like to choose who that person is, or should I? When you name it that way, you just call it out directly and invite another person. That could open up the conversation with this person of whom you're having conflict with. Give them the choice. Do they want to be collaborative, or do they not want to? And you'll be surprised at how that will open up some doors. Join us on Friday's episode. We are reaching the halfway point of 2026. It's crazy to believe that, honestly. It's crazy how fast time goes. And I'm going to guide you through an exercise of reflection and planning. If you are rocking 2026, this episode will give you the opportunity to build on that and have an even better second half. And if you're not where you want to be just yet, that's okay too. This episode will help you to realign and finish this year strong. If you wanted 2026 to be your year, it's not too late. It's not too late. Join us on Friday, and I will guide you through some steps to help you ensure that 2026 is your year. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. I am rooting for you.